All right, thank you. So I'm Kate. The cute blonde over here is Susan. And the reason why Susan and I partnered to do this class together is because she's the Education Organizational Development Manager for our district in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I oversee operations. So kind of the way we're set up is she kind of sets the vision, and she's led all of our management team through this performance calibration process. And then I'm in overseeing operations, kind of implementing it kind of at the practical level with the staffs and the other managers and supervisors. So that's kind of why we teamed up. So let's talk about what we're going to go over today. First of all, why performance management is important in our courts, how we can raise the bar fairly and consistently so employees perform better. The process that Susan led us through in Hennepin County in Minneapolis was about an 18-month process. So we'll go through that from start to finish if it's something that you want to consider for your court. The implementation, we'll go over the key steps that Susan put together for us from the first plans, the calibration, and how it helped with our organizational change. And then we've got some handouts and tools for you to take back to use if you'd like. They're also available on the NACM website. So what is performance management? Balanced performance management is the system of fair and reasonable performance expectations and feedback. It's open, consistent, collaborative, and promotes continuous improvement. One thing that we found in our district is that we'd have balanced performance management or consistent performance management at a division level, but not across an organization. So for example, I oversaw criminal court. And so I saw all the reviews coming in for criminal court employees, and I could kind of see like, oh, the supervisors and managers seem to have similar expectations. You know, yeah, they would give that person a meets at the jail. Yeah, they would give that person a meets expectations at the government center. And then, but then go over to civil court, and they had a whole different scale they used. But in our court, we have a union. Employees transfer across lines frequently, but we were measuring them all differently. So that became a problem for us, which prompted a lot of the work that Susan led us through. Okay, so what challenges do you face in managing staff members' performance in your area? Susan's going to show us a short video, and then what we'll have you do is talk to the people around you about the challenges that you're facing in your district.
So I brought you in to talk about your performance. I'm not happy. Like this right now is just unprofessional. You're a visionary.
I know.
But the 3-hour naps in the middle of the day cannot continue.
I don't take naps.
You don't take naps. Okay, let's talk about your reports. Here is Bill's quarterly. This is what you give me.
That's Mommy.
Let's talk about your lunch break.
Playtime.
You know, a lot of our associates are taking working lunches, trying to catch up on workload, and you're off God knows where, doing God knows what. I don't think it's working out. I think we need to say goodbye.
But
No, Penny, we need to part ways at this juncture. You're fired.
please don't fire me.
I'm sorry, Penny. You're fired.
I have to support my mom and dad.
Penny, I don't want to hear about your personal life.
I'm gonna work harder.
You've said this before.
I'm gonna work smarter.
No. Welcome.
Be nice to Penny.
Why don't you turn around, maybe get in groups of 5 or so, and first introduce yourself, what your name is, where you're from. One of the great things about this conference is networking and learning from each other and making contacts. And then discuss what challenges you face in managing staff members' performance. Choose someone to report out, and we'll kind of briefly go over that in about 5 minutes or so. Okay. All right. Oh. All right, let's come back as a group. I'm interested in what you talked about. Should we start in the back this time? Otherwise, nobody will sit in the front ever if I keep asking the people in the front right away. So the group in the back, what did you talk about? What are some challenges that you're facing in managing staff's performance in your courts?
Nope, doesn't work. Oh, there you go. Okay. So we just talked a little bit. Hi, Kate. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
We just talked a little bit about some of the real, on a high level challenges. For example, on my court in California, I just became the CEO in Sacramento 7 months ago. And much to my surprise, we do not do performance evaluations anymore because of the budget cuts. So that's a huge culture shift and something I'm certainly not used to. And when I mention it to my staff, my managers, directors, executive staff, they say, not now. Now is not the time. Where I believe now is the time. This is a perfect time to start them up again and really start giving employees feedback and getting feedback. So that's one thing we heard. Another thing was generational, multi-generational. Employees that we have, different expectations, and there's always a challenge with those. Someone else mentioned technology, that technology is moving fast, but with the budget cuts and so forth, we're not able to train them and to get the technology in there and to train them and keep up with it. So those were some of the things we mentioned.
All right, thank you. Isn't that interesting? People, not thinking you have to measure performance if no money's going to be tied to it. That's kind of scary. Yeah. There was, in our session this morning, this woman was talking about how they were having, it was California as well, they were having layoffs, and everybody's performance right before the layoffs was just magnificent. Everybody's just producing and always on time, and you need me to stay late, I will. And then once the layoff list came out and people left and they realized, oh, I'm here, then it dropped right back down again. Isn't that funny? Not funny at all, actually. But all right, next group. How about somebody in this area? Oh. No. It's probably helpful. I don't need two.
Nebraska and North Dakota. South Dakota, sorry. We talked about communication is a challenge with our staff. I, in particular, have attorneys that I supervise, and each of their personalities is different. So, am I there? Okay. Meeting with them, one of them likes an agenda before we meet. The other one just wants to pop into my office, and motivating them on projects, the way that suits them the best. Let's see, you talked about some communication issues with your staff. New management, as a new manager, how to delegate without over-delegating. And expectations, setting clear expectations to where staff knows what to expect and what to expect of you.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's challenging to kind of set a style that works with everyone else's style, but also be consistent. You were talking about some people wanting this real formal agenda process in your meetings, and some people just stopping in. And kind of the challenge as managers is to make sure you're being consistent, but still adjusting your style so that they're successful. It can be tricky. How about anybody in this area? Don't everybody go at once?
Not having rewards for good performance, and also managing people with different levels of technology skills, and how they perform, whether performance is high, some are more efficient than others, and working around that.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we're experiencing, we're kind of moving to this eCourt Minnesota is kind of the tagline. And speaking of technology, is like, how long do you let people catch up or get used to it before you have to start addressing problems? Do you give them 6 months? Do you give them a year? At what point are you like, okay, now we've got to go down a different path because you're just not getting it? And kind of speaks to the generational issues that were discussed in the back of the room, too. It's like, well, some people might pick it up. I'm not real tech savvy myself. I just started texting, and I'm impressed with myself that I can figure it out. And this Siri thing's amazing. I just got that like last week, and so anyways, kind of everybody's in a different place, and how long do you let them get caught up or get with the times, I guess. All right, anybody over here? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm from Surprise, Arizona. Surprise. She's from SeaTac. I was talking with her. One of the things that we had in common, I was surprised, is performance evaluations. We have programs where the employee has to do a self-evaluation. And one supervisor allowed employees not to add comments, just to rate themselves. Another supervisor sent it back to the employee and said, you need to add comments. So, my question then is, do these employees not care? And it's hard because there is no pay incentive with the performance evaluations. So I've taken to recognizing employees in a different way by randomly selecting one employee a week and giving them thank you notes, personalizing them, and recognizing areas where they do perform well. And I was surprised by the response on some of the employees because I thought they didn't like me. But they did come in and they gave me a heartfelt thank you, and they really appreciated it. So I'm hoping that will help also maybe for next year's performance evaluations, where we'll have people 100% response and adding comments to the performance evaluations.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. It makes you wonder if they were scared to comment with their supervisor, or did they not care, or what the situation was. I think it's very challenging times when you don't have the financial incentives around. We really struggle with that. We've had a freeze on our salaries for 4 or 5 years now. And one thing our administration implemented, which was helpful in didn't cost hard money. It was kind of soft money, but they offered a week of paid time off. Recognition leave, they called it. We couldn't do it for union employees. We could only do it for management staff. So that part wasn't very good. But it did help motivate the management staff, which was, it's quite a few people in our district. So we didn't pay out the money, but they were able to take a little extra time off. But it wasn't like a bonus check or something like that. So it seemed to kind of have people were working towards it or wanting to get, or they were saying to us as a manager, what do I have to do to get that extra week's vacation? So it seemed to kind of motivate people. All right, you guys, anybody have anything back here? All right. Wonderful.
So a lot of what we talked about is very similar to what we've heard, but we've got a person here that's in Alaska, can only go from port to port by airplane. So the physical separation factor in performance review is very different. And the other thing, in terms of money, but one of the successes that we've had locally is now trying to tie everybody's individual job performance to the port's strategic plan, so that each job is linked to the overall.
So the staff really understand why, when I come in every day, how I'm contributing to the mission or vision. Okay, yeah, that is challenging to kind of translate for employees on their day-to-day job. It's very true. Okay, so why improve in performance management? Supervisors inheriting problem employees through transfers. Who in the room has a union in their organization? Unionized? There's line staff? Okay, wow, I'm impressed with how few there are. Well, we have a union in Minneapolis. And so the way it works is when you have an opening, if anybody can lateral in, and if you're the most senior person, we have to take you, whether we really want you or not, or whether we think you're going to be a good fit for that division or not. The only times when we don't have to take someone is if they have 2 or more needs improvements or unacceptables on their review, or if they completely bomb the interview. But by bombing the interview, I mean when you ask a question, what's your customer service experience, and they say, I hate people, then maybe we don't have to hire them. But otherwise, we basically have to take the first one on the list. So obviously, this creates problems because we end up, because everybody's got different levels of what they think is a good employee or an employee that can improve, where we end up with problem employees just moving around the organization because no one's holding them accountable. Employees failing probation. So this is the only workaround our management group has when you get a problem employee is if they're not successful in the 6 months, you can fail them on probation and they go back to where they came from. The problem with that is then they bump whoever filled their position back to the previous position, and then that person bumps. So it creates this bumping that eventually ends up with someone losing their job because someone probably ended up coming in from the outside to backfill at some point. And of course, then there's all the time you've spent when you fail people on probation. You've spent time training them, you know, you've invested time and money into them, and then to have to fail them is not something we want to do. So another reason why performance management is so important. Ratings seemed as unfair, inconsistent across the organization. I spoke of this a little earlier, how even in our district, we were looking at ourselves as divisions, but not as an entire organization. And then when you add the fact that people are laterally transferring all over the place, it created problems. And it creates relationship issues amongst our management team. So, you know, oh, I work in Kate's area, and she's really strict, and oh, you know, there's no way you can get an exceptional if you work for her. Oh, I work with Anna, and oh, my gosh, if I show up to work on time, I get exceptionals on my review. So it starts to get, there can be kind of a rift then, you know, and then especially when problem employees are being transferred around, and I'm going back to Anna and saying, thanks a lot. You know, I got this load from you because you weren't willing to hold them accountable. Now I have to, and now I'm the bad guy. So you can see how that would affect relationships, morale, and the staff obviously see this as well. Employee behavioral problems going unaddressed. I kind of spoke to that. All right, now Susan's going to go through some performance practices.
All right, as Kate mentioned, as we overhauled our performance management system, we brought in a consultant who specializes in psychology for organizations. His name is David Farrar, and we have actually brought his business cards and his website information here because the wonderful thing about Dr. David Farrar is he provides free tools, information, and guidelines on his website. So if you're interested in following up with that, we've got his information up here. But as we were working with David, he asked us a couple of very interesting and intriguing questions. One, what is your court's mission and vision? Because we always try to tie in mission and vision with performance management. And so we had a clear and concise mission and vision. His next question, what are your court's core values? How many of you have court core values? I see about, 10 hands or so here in the audience. He said it's very important as you're having performance management conversations with staff members to talk about what your office stands for. Dig deeper, dig and expand the mission and vision. So we're handing out our court's core values, and we landed on integrity, diversity, relationships, optimization of resources, and innovation as our core values. So as managers and supervisors are having conversations with their employees about what's expected at work, they're tying in our core values. Here's an example. We often have employees who say, it's not my job to be Joe's best friend. I work right next to Joe, but frankly, I don't like him. I don't like the way he cooks his vegetables. You know, at lunchtime they reek. He asks me too many questions, and he's always on the phone or doing internet research. So if he's got a problem, it's not in my job description to help Joe out. He should go see you. You're the supervisor and manager. Well, that's just not okay in our court because one of our core values is relationships. So we have to honor our relationships, and we're going to hold people accountable to that on their performance review. So now as managers and supervisors are having conversations with employees about relationships, they've got something to sink their teeth into and include in performance review goals. So another core value of our performance management system is position descriptions. Again, the employee who thinks that something A, B, C, or D is not part of their job, we pull out the position descriptions and say, oh, yes, it is. And this is why we're holding you accountable to it in your performance review. So branching off of that then, in our performance management best practices, we teach the importance of trust, and we teach Franklin Covey's Leading at the Speed of Trust to all managers and supervisors in the court. It's required training as well as some other core leadership training. We talk about the importance of confidentiality, recognizing employees. I've heard in your group exercise this morning, you shared the importance of being balanced and providing recognition as much as constructive criticism. And peer reviews. We have a peer review form that Kate's going to talk about a little later in the presentation, so I'll leave that until then. One-up meetings. We require all managers and supervisors, prior to giving the employee's performance review to them, to meet with their boss or their manager and to say, this is what I'm thinking about rating Billy on. What do you think about his performance review? Is it fair? Is it balanced? Do you think I've given Billy the halo effect? Or do you think I'm being too hard on him? And then calibration meetings. We're really going to dig deep into calibration meetings today because a lot of organizations don't do calibration meetings, especially judicial branch or court organizations. And then just the execution of the employee performance review. Making sure that employees do self-evaluations. Somebody brought that up this morning. The importance of self-evaluations. The fact that self-evaluations are mandatory and employees should be doing a good job on them. That means providing feedback and written feedback, and if they're not doing it correctly, to send it back to them until it's right. And then talking about performance, actual versus expected. We have a STAR model we're going to go through with you today that really helps frame up the actual performance versus the expected. What's going well, opportunities for improvement, and then this is the hope of all performance management systems, career development. If we're all doing performance management correctly, we're developing the careers of the employees who work for us. Even the employee who says, all I want to do for the rest of my career is be a senior court clerk in the civil division entering civil cases. That's wonderful. You can still develop their career in that position over the next 10 plus years. So this is a large chart, and for those of you who like charts, it's very detailed, and I'm not going to go into it in detail during this presentation, but it really demonstrates the 18-month process that we went through when we decided to improve our performance management system. From the beginning, where we talked with managers and supervisors to introduce new concepts and tools, and we gave talking points to managers and supervisors, and we met with the union, etc. Because as you can imagine, with budgets being as tight as they are across the nation, coming in, Chris, and telling people, we're going to overhaul our performance management system. We're going to implement some new and exciting tools that you have to use, and we're going to require you to use self-evaluations and do peer review forms. You can imagine that wasn't very exciting news for people, and it took a lot of time to get the ball rolling in the right direction to the point where people are owning it, the performance management system, internalizing it, and actually excited to use it. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. So what is performance calibration? Performance calibration for us was the one tool that really changed the entire paradigm of how we're managing performance in the 4th District. It really changed people's insights about performance management and helped us achieve some of the problems, or helped us resolve some of the problems that we were experiencing. Defined it as when a group of managers or supervisors responsible for conducting employee performance reviews discusses each employee's performance rating with each other and the supervisor's manager's reasons for that rating. So how many of you, let me ask, in your courts meet on a regular basis, whether it's annually or every other month or quarterly, with your colleagues and bring actual employee reviews to those meetings and talk about A, what's written in the performance review, and B, why you gave the employee the rating that you gave him or her? Used to do it. 1. All right. So again, this demonstrates it's not widely used across courts and judicial branches. So why do this? Why is performance calibration so important and such a powerful tool to be utilized? It's to provide managers and supervisors with an opportunity to reach agreement on consistent performance ratings for similar positions across all lines of business and court divisions. As Kate alluded to, we often have some managers and supervisors in maybe the criminal division rating all the employees across the board at exceeds expectations or exceptional. And then you've got some supervisors, managers in our civil court who don't believe in exceeds and exceptional. So all their employees across the board are meets expectations. Well, as employees are competing for the rare positions and the promotional opportunities that we have, you can see how difficult it is for somebody who's got all meets expectations to compete with somebody who's exceptional across the board, right? And as they were transferring from division to division and talking about what their supervisors were giving them on performance reviews, because employees do talk about what they get on their performance reviews, right? They were seen as not fair. It's like there's no buy-in. This thing is worthless. I'm not getting credit for what I do. No matter what I do, no matter how well I perform, I'm always going to be a meets expectations if I'm working in civil filing. It's to provide a common language, understanding, and application of performance ratings to ease communication and ensure accountability, to empower managers and supervisors to have candid and constructive performance meetings with their direct reports, even when the conversations may be difficult. This was a nice discovery about the performance calibration meetings, because maybe I'm supervising Joe, and Joe is really popular in our court. He's got a lot of friends, and his lot of friends includes some prominent judges, and I'm about to give Joe a needs improvement in the area of communication. Because frankly, he's very inconsiderate to customers, and unless you're somebody important, he's not going to give you the time of day. So how much easier is it for me to give Joe this needs improvement and have this conversation with him in a performance review meeting if my 8 colleagues on my senior management team are standing behind me, they understand the reason for the rating, and if Judge Johnson goes to any one of them, they've got my back, right? Yes?
You just touched on something that I've experienced in the past and I think is really difficult, is in some jurisdictions, even large jurisdictions, judges are involved in the performance review process.
Yes.
And they do have clerks that have been assigned to them for years and years, and they refuse to let you as a manager address certain issues, and it really creates a problem.
Yes.
So I don't know how to get over that hurdle.
So this performance calibration could be the answer to your problem, maybe, if you get the judges on board along with some colleagues and talk about Joe's performance. It is difficult. We all acknowledge that when you've got judges who are supervising staff or co-supervising staff, to hold them accountable in the way that you would like. This may be the solution. And lastly, to inspire managers and supervisors to critically assess the standards employees are achieving across the organization, something Kate addressed earlier. So why do this? Why do performance management calibration? Dr. David Farrar, this is one of my favorite quotes because it rings so true. If we want to use our performance ratings as input to decisions such as pay, bonuses, promotions, and disciplinary actions, they had better be right. I have seen organizations open themselves up to significant legal and financial consequences because their performance management system contained inherent biases, right, and or disorganized application of standards. Does that all ring true for you, working in a very, at times, political organization? So now we're going to calibrate some performance reviews, and we've actually brought copies of high-level managers' ratings on employees in the area of accountability. And so as Kate passes this out, I just want to provide some direction. I want you to look at the ratings, and we'll assign you different groups of employees so you don't have to look at all of them. I want you to read what the manager supervisor wrote, and we haven't changed any of this. This is word for word what they've written, and we want you to look at the ratings that they've given to people, and we want you to talk in your groups, in your small groups again. Do you agree with these ratings? If you do, why? And if you don't, why not? So, do you have enough handouts, Kate? Extra? I'll take extras. All right, so let me divide this out. We want this front group here to take Jane Johnson. She's rather lengthy, but I'm sure you'll be able to work through her. And we'll give this group over here in the back. Are you all meeting in the back over here? Natalie and Sheila. You can take both of those. And then we want this whole side of the room to take Paul. So as you break out into your groups, take a look at Paul, and we'll debrief in about 5 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer. Let's get back together again and calibrate some performance. And when I say calibrate, really, your feedback is what we're looking for on these reviews. We handed out these reviews and the language and the ratings, and we know that you may or may not agree with what's in the reviews, how they're written, or the ratings. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's start with Jane Johnson. We had the group up in the front here reviewing Jane Johnson. What are your thoughts?
Jane is an employee that had a requires improvement rating, and there's quite a long narrative that we thought repeated some of the sentiment. We were a little divided as to whether the narrative matched the rating, but I think we landed on it does match the rating.
Okay.
But the recommendations were the comments need to have something that's more succinct and precise and define things and have measures that can be counted. For example, Jane has let things fall through the cracks for periods of time. What is a period of time?
Good point.
Often she does this. What is often?
Yes.
Jude's often might not be my often or
Yes.
Jane's often. So there were some things that didn't demonstrate objective, able to count and track. And then we just thought it was a long, long diatribe that could have been shortened because this would be overwhelming to poor Jane.
Yes. And this is one competency. Imagine what the whole review looked like when we're talking about communication and other areas of accountability.
Those one-up meetings, because when you were talking about how often and always in those words, if you're having a meeting with your staff person at least once a month for an hour, then you're documenting what you went over, where they're at with projects, and at the end of the year you realize, wow, I've talked to them 12 times about that. I would call that often. Or if I'm not meeting with them except quarterly, you don't have as much to stand on, and it doesn't mean as much to the employee either.
But I put something precise. On 3 occasions, June 1st, July 20th, and August 15th, I observed Jane did X.
Right.
Something that's
Yeah.
dependable. She can go after.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
something you can
absolutely.
sink your teeth into. She said, if for you in the back, in the area of often, what does often mean? Does it mean 3 times a week? Does it mean once a month? It's too squishy. You can't sink your teeth into it.
I read it and it seemed like it came from both sides. I mean, you know, you've got a difficult job, you depend on others, you're not bugging them enough. Well, you know, it puts her like, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. And if I got something like that, I would just think, this person just doesn't like me because they haven't given me anything useful here. They criticize both modes of operation. So what the heck am I supposed to do to make this person happy?
You know what? I've heard Jane talk about her manager, and that's some of the exact same things that Jane has said. I'm darned if I do and I'm darned if I don't. I just can't be successful working for this person. Great feedback. Do you guys have anything to add over here? No, we didn't. Oh, okay. All right, let's move on. And we combined 2 of the smaller ratings, Natalie and Sheila. What did your groups do with Natalie and Sheila?
Well, we had some of the same comments as the prior evaluation, but that there's just basically not enough in either of these to warrant an exceeds or an exceptional. There's no examples. I read this and I say they meet expectations. There's nothing in there that gives me, you know, what did they do to merit this?
Right. What a good point. I mean, when you look at Natalie, I think there's 4 sentences and she's getting an exceptional. Why?
Her productivity, what makes her highly productive.
Right. The feedback is there's just absolutely no measurement. What makes Natalie successful? What makes her exceptional? We don't know. And what if Natalie is working on getting a promotional opportunity and I'm one of the hiring managers and I want to review the last 2 performance reviews of the employees who are my final candidates, and I get a hold of Natalie and I see, yes, the manager says she's exceptional, but there's really nothing here that tells me as a hiring manager she's exceptional, then I've done Natalie a disservice as well, if she truly is exceptional. Anybody else have any feedback about Sheila or Natalie?
I always took objection to using lots of adjectives and this is the best employee ever, or I think this person is wonderful. I always was concerned about that because of different definitions of the words. And how many adjectives can you put in it that kind of cloud what you're really saying?
Yes. You can say a lot, as demonstrated by Jane's performance review, and even though you're writing a lot, say very little, right? No pun intended.
Well, for Sheila, what we discussed was the one sentence that was really troubling is she does and consistently meets the needs of the other professional staff, if at all possible. So I'm not clear on how you consistently meet and if at all possible.
Right. They conflict with each other, don't they? Doesn't this group discussion of just these 3 employees really demonstrate the need to have calibration discussions amongst your colleagues? These are colleagues from our court. They're basically in the same position spread throughout the court. And these are the reviews they're writing just in the area of accountability. Can you imagine what an entire performance review would look like? And can you see why our employees are confused? Why they think the performance management system's not fair? And why they believe managers and supervisors aren't consistent? The proof is right here. So let's talk about Paul Ryan. This side of the room, anybody have comments about Paul?
Oh, love Paul. There's a lot of love for Paul.
Any love for Paul out there? Anyone want to be Paul's spokesperson?
Yeah, just a comment. So I read it. It sounds like he's got a lot of good things he's doing. Immediately, I was facing a little cognitive dissonance, though, because meets expectations, but there's nowhere in here that it tells me why their rating just meets expectations. So everything is, documenting key things that he's doing and good things he's doing, but I didn't understand the rating. I didn't connect it at all.
Yeah, even the language in the words don't reflect meets, do they? What would you give Paul if this is all you had to go on? Exceptional? Exceeds? Definitely not meets, right? But the problem is we have managers and supervisors in our court who don't believe anybody is exceeds, and they really don't believe in exceptional. We actually had performance calibration meetings where managers said, I don't believe in giving exceptionals. And Kate's question always is,
what do I have to do to be exceptional then?
Yeah, if the rating is there, why can't I earn it? And then the question is, what do I have to do to get it, and what have I not done to earn it, right? So that's why we do performance calibration. Jude?
Can you give a sense of how many employees in your court?
Yes.
And how big the calibration groups are?
Yes, good question. Our organization has over 650 employees, give or take, in the area of 700 to 650. We have approximately our supervisors at the line staff level are supervising 10 or 12 employees each. And our court op managers have at least 2 managers working for them. And our senior management team has...
the total number varies from 80 to 130.
Yes. And so when we have our performance calibration meetings, the senior manager group is about 12 senior managers meeting. The court operations manager group is about 15 to 16, sometimes 20 court op managers meeting. And the court operations supervisor group is our largest group, and that's probably about 25 to 30 supervisors meeting. So great question. And the performance calibration meeting works in all of those dynamics because we're having the same conversation we're having here today with you.
Is this on? Yeah. I'm in city of Colorado Springs, and just a question. We have 3 ratings in our evaluation system. We have exceeds expectations, meets expectations, and needs improvement.
Okay.
And so I'm just kind of wondering, are you recommending that we have more than that under the 5? Or because what we found is that the more you have, the harder it is to differentiate.
That's a very good question. We don't have a recommendation on how many categories or rating levels you use. It's all in about how are you using the rating levels that you have. And so if you have 3, you could have the same calibration discussion around those 3 rating levels. We chose 5, landed on 5 because that's what our judicial branch office does, and we wanted to be consistent across the state. So good question.
One thing we found in going through these calibration meetings, a review I wrote wasn't in this packet, but was in a previous packet in one of our calibration meetings. And when people were discussing it, and the names were taken out, so they didn't know I wrote it, but I found myself, really embarrassed actually, because they didn't agree with my rating, and what I said really wasn't what they thought matched the rating. And so it was an interesting discussion because I left really personally motivated, like I don't want to be that person again. That's the example. So that was a kind of I don't know what you'd say, like a result of that wasn't as evident to everyone, but was evident in my own head.
Right. We've got 1, 2, and 3 in the back.
I was just going to ask a question. Do you recommend an odd number of options regardless of whether it's 3 or 5 or whatever?
Yeah, our research director, she always tells us an odd number. And she would probably say 5. She's has her doctorate in like that kind of thing.
The reason I asked, the previous county auditor that would come in and audit us had a 4-point rating, and the top was exceed standards, and then the 2 other were below standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it said a lot about the attitude of that auditor. And the district judge just finally said, "You're out of here."
Just a word about our calibration process. I didn't know that's what it was when we were doing it. We did it for about 6 years. It was wonderful because all of the managers, there were 8 people plus me, would meet once a month. We had 66 to 68 staff. So each month, the reviews that were due within the last or upcoming time period, each manager was responsible for preparing the evaluation, the whole thing, beginning to end, giving it to us, hopefully prior to the meeting so we could review it. Then we would come together and debate and share and validate content, and if some supervisor used vague language, we used it as a chance to make it more precise. If some supervisor rambled on and others were too succinct, we balanced that. We validated what's the scale, is it right? We were bound to a scale of 0 through 5. We came to agreement on where is the C rating in there, where's the average, where isn't it. We debated brand new employees, could they get a 5 out the chute or could they not? It was wonderful. My concern was groupthink and labeling of employees because all the top managers court-wide were present. I believe I did see groupthink taking place on some employees. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we all knew where the appropriate line and the appropriate fairness was. The IT director, finance director, security director, everyone court-wide was in this discussion. We stopped it. It was very time-consuming. I think we felt at that point that they were smart enough on what the process was, they could go it alone. Mm-hmm. But I think it did wonderful things.
That's great. Yeah, we do our performance calibration once a year because it does take time, and we redact all employee names and identifying division information. So it helps take away the group think mentality because you really don't know who you're talking about. Jane Johnson obviously is not Jane Johnson. I know who she is, but for this discussion, she's Jane. So good points made.
People trying to guess what it is?
Oh yeah, there's those people.
Yes.
Yeah.
They always have those people, yes.
Yeah.
In Baton Rouge, well, we have core values, and they've devised a system where we add numerical values for each core value, so that at the end of there's a calculation that we use to say you scored from a 3.0 to a 3.4 will give you exceeds requirements, or exceptional will be a 4. It would be a 3.5 to a 3.7. So they have numerical values, and anything that meets that exceptional, you got to have documentation to validate why. Everything else, it's just subjective, but anything that is going to affect, that exceptional, then you have to have documentation, time, place, when, where, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we seem that takes out a lot of the subjectiveness of evaluating. If you can put some numerical values on each core
Good.
subject that you have to do.
Good. That's great feedback. And, I'm sure we do performance management ratings differently across the judicial branches, across our offices. But again, the importance of having these conversations with colleagues is so key. A couple more comments and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to that one we had on Ryan, Paul Ryan. So I kind of went with it a different direction than you were, which is sometimes you'll see when managers or supervisors turn in a, because I do a lot of reviews of these, turn in a review of an employee, and you see that mismatch between the documentation and the specific comments and the rating. Sometimes the rating really reflects what they're thinking, and it's easier to say the nice things in the comments. We all are that way. It's easy to say the nice things and note all the attaboy, attagirl stuff, but when the rating itself doesn't match, sometimes that reveals they're not putting everything down.
Right.
And you need the spurs to try to get that out of them. But that's really critical, because that's one of the most important areas. If there's things that you're trying to document for improvement, you need to document it. And so those things aren't the, gee, you're wonderful. But so when I look at it, I'm always wondering, is there really more? Is the rating really reflecting your view? And you're not putting everything down in the comment section.
Good point, and that's the importance of having, we require managers and supervisors to meet with the next level up and show them the performance review before it goes to the employees, because it gives the manager and the supervisor time to have a very candid conversation about what's written in the review, what's missing that may not be documented that should be, performance problems, and it helps keep consistency again across the organization. One more comment, and we'll move on to peer reviews.
What issues that I've found, and the difficulty in my position is we've had a lot of individuals as managers who have kind of misled employees about their performance, meaning they didn't want to offend anybody or hurt their feelings. And so now we have new managers coming in who are being realistic, and it's a fight now, because they think you're picking on them or you're misleading them, and you're trying to get them the development that they need to actually be successful in their career. We're getting a lot of pushback from that.
That's a good point, and I think Kate can relate. She's recently been promoted to our assistant district court administrator, and she's inheriting an employee who's been rated exceptional across the board, right? And now she's got to provide the realism, and it's going to be a difficult conversation.
One effective tool I implemented when I took over my office 2.5 years ago was I have 4 directors and 8 supervisors, and I require the supervisors to meet with their staff. We have about 100 employees every month, and then they document it, they write everything down. So when they do the annual review, it's very data backed, there's very specific facts, because nobody can remember in December what happened last January. It's hard, and that's really brought up positive feedback. And we actually, after the evals go out, we do a survey monkey with the employees and find out from them, do you think they were fair? How do you feel about them? And each year they've gone up. So
that's great. I've not heard of that idea before. Well, for the sake of time, we need to move on to peer reviews, but this was a great calibration discussion, and this is actually what a calibration meeting would look like if you had one in your court with your colleagues over performance reviews. Everybody's opinion is so valuable, and it really helps shape the insight in how performance management is viewed organizationally instead of just by division.
Thanks. Susan's going to cue up this video, and while she does that, I'll just start talking a little bit about peer feedback. What is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself. We go through this process in our district where the managers have about 20 different things, and you're supposed to rate them on a value, you're supposed to number them, the top 8, what you think is the most important in your area, the top 8. And one of the things I always rate high is self-awareness. It's so hard to work with someone who is not self-aware. You can help so many people along, but if they're not willing to look at themselves, you've wasted your time. This video will reflect a little bit of that.
Look at this. Interdepartmental communication needs improvement. What is that? We have one department down there, pound the pavement.
And this guy watches us.
Setting priorities needs improvement. Multitasking needs improvement. I have one task. One priority. Glad tidings. Creative problem solving. Good. Oh, I got that right.
Sits in judgment.
Efficacy and results.
Who's going to get a bonus? Who's going to get promoted? Who gets fired?
You're not getting fired. Let me see that. This is good. Good. Fair. Very good. What's wrong with that?
Takes excellence to get ahead.
Look at this. Poor, fair, needs improvement. Do I look worried? No. Because who needs organization?
Really could have used a bonus this year.
Who needs respect for superiors?
Shelley's pregnant again.
Hey, congrats.
Amongst these angels. But people do talk about their performance review ratings with each other.
Yeah, so we're trying to illustrate here, well, self-awareness, maybe lack of, and also that the importance of being fair and consistent because people talk amongst each other, and it will be noticed if you're not. All right. We have a peer feedback form that we use in our district. I should have mentioned before, all these handouts are available on the NACOM website. They weren't this morning, which is why we have copies, and we've recycled them, so we're just kind of handing them out. I know there might not be quite enough for everyone in the room, but they are available, and you are more than welcome to beg, borrow, and steal anything here. Put your name at the top and go for it. We don't care. Okay, peer feedback. So the form that's going around is something that we distribute to everyone on that employee's team. So for example, we have the criminal jail division. There's 14 employees there. Kate's one of those employees. This goes to all 14 of her coworkers, or 13 of her coworkers to complete. The important things about peer feedback is to have a numeric scale that's the same. Everybody gets the same form. They can make comments if they want. Couple good things about this that I've found so far since we began using it is sometimes it validates my thoughts or it completely doesn't. And I'm thinking, boy, I'm really off base with this person. My perception is way different than what everybody else sees them. So that's been really helpful for me in using this form. Unlocks information about how an employee is perceived by those around them. I think what's challenging in our jobs, that I'm sure all of you are in a lot of meetings every day, you're not on the ground with your employees watching everything that's happening. I was completing a review in January and did the peer feedback, and what I learned is something I would have never learned about that employee had I not done the peer feedback. And what I found is this particular employee oversaw 2 different buildings. One we'll call the government center, the other one we'll call the jail. So the peer feedback I got from the people who work at the government center was she's never here, she's favoring the jail, she never comes over here. The feedback I got from the folks at the jail was that she's always here, she micromanages us, she must not trust us, she never goes over there. So I would not have known that because I'm not around enough to learn that information, and so now she splits her time 50-50 always to try to ease those perceptions. Awareness is a prerequisite. We kind of talked about self-awareness already. And creating a culture of openness is a step towards a more effective and engaged workforce. Something that came up this morning in talking about the peer feedback form and how we rolled it out, at first it was very difficult for staff to get used to it. There was a lot of concerns about confidentiality. You know, I'd come in and I'd have one folded under my keyboard and, you know, these covert operations going on. I think people were worried, oh, my name's going to be associated with this, although the name is optional on there. So it took a while for people to get used to it, but when they started seeing changes in behavior, they really got on board. So the example that I just gave you, where then that manager split their time 50-50, morning, afternoon, you know, people saw, oh, she did get the feedback, she's listening, she's changed her behavior, so next time I get this, I'm going to also provide more feedback. So it's been effective for us. All right, Susan's going to go over the STAR model.
All right, the next piece of, the next important tool that we utilized was the STAR model, and this was developed by Dr. David Farrar, who I referenced earlier. And so we want to pass out one of our important forms that we've been utilizing. It's called the Incident Report Form. And remember when we did the performance calibration, we spoke about Jane Johnson, right? She was the first one who had that long write-up, and it was just a little bit mushy. Jane Johnson is actually a real employee with real performance problems. And so what you may discover about Jane is some of the information that's in our incident report form should have probably landed in Jane's performance review because it's more concrete. And so the incident report form is a documentation that we need from supervisors and managers to make sure that when we get to the point of having to discipline employees, whether it's a written reprimand, an oral reprimand, suspending them without pay, terminating them, that we have all the concrete information we would need if the discipline is grieved by the union. And oftentimes what we are finding in the past is supervisors and managers would write their notes in a notebook or type them up online and save them in a personal folder, but oftentimes the important key information that you need to carry something forward in a grievance was just plain missing. And then months and months later, the manager's supervisor's trying to recreate that information in a performance review or in a grievance hearing. Another tool that we're going to pass out is called the Personal Improvement Plan. And so this Personal Improvement Plan can come before a performance review, it can come after a performance review, it can come mid-cycle when an employee who was successful is starting to derail, maybe because they have personal problems. But again, it's just another one of those tools to help get employees on track. And so as you're looking at these two forms, something that I want you to notice is that the STAR model is intertwined into everything that you're reading here. And so we start out in coach managers and supervisors, always name the situation, the environment in which the behavior happens. So going back to my earlier reference of Joe, Joe refuses to give training to his new colleague Jack, who sits right next to him. And he thinks that's okay, but it's really not. So in the meeting with Joe, in the coaching meeting with Joe, let's talk about the situation in which the behavior occurs. And then what's the reasonable expectation of what should be done? Joe, we expect that when Jack has questions, you answer them. No, you're not the supervisor, but relationships are important in our organization, and as a result, you need to be a good colleague and help your coworker out. What was actually done? Joe, when Jack asked you a question, you said, go talk to the supervisor about that. So that was what was actually done. And then the result. What result has that got on the organization, on the colleagues, and on our court customers? It breaks down relationships, Joe, when you talk to Jack like this. It breaks down morale and teamwork in the office. And the customers at the front counter see how you're treating each other, and that's just not okay. So again, the STAR model is intertwined into everything, hopefully, that you're seeing on the incident report form and the personal improvement plan. And the remote. So Kate's going to talk a little bit about Jane here.
All right. So in Jane's example, it's someone, you know, we wanted to invest some time in, and so we followed a path of progressive discipline until hopefully performance was changed. As I noted, we're a union. We have a union, so there's several steps to making progress when it comes to going down a disciplinary path. An important thing to remember is the severity of the offense. So for example, we had an employee who, in our district, no insurance violations are payable. You can just pay them. You don't have to go to court or see a judge or anything like that. So we had an individual, and if you bring in proof within 10 days of getting the ticket, it's dismissed. Well, we had an individual people were bringing in their proof, they were keeping the money, dismissing the ticket. So they were stealing from us. That would be an example of where we would not go through this process. That is an example where they would be terminated right away, right? But communication issues, things like that, that's where you want to give somebody a fair shake and try to provide them the tools so that they can improve. We have a transfer of learning form that we're going to go over here. Susan's much better at reviewing this than I am. But what we would normally ask you to do we have enough time, Susan? Okay. What we want you to do is look this over, and based on the performance improvement plan and the incident report that you have, kind of think about how you would use a form like this in your organization or based on the examples that we gave you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. My flight plans.
Right. Yeah. It's a whole lot of steps. Oh, yeah. Bad typo. Yeah.
We've got 5 minutes for them to discuss.
Okay, so why don't you
About
discuss, look over this form, discuss kind of, I know there's a lot of material to read with the performance improvement plan and the incident report, but kind of briefly look over them and think about how you would fill this form out when you're working with Jane. So what step we're on is that employee transfer of learning. Wanting to kind of lay out the expectations before you're, in this instance, sending them to some training to try to improve. So the importance of having this conversation before going to the training.
And with Jane, you could send her to 5-10 different classes, right? I mean, there's a lot to cover with Jane. So just come up with one class you think you'd want to send her to, considering where she's struggling the most in. Of learning form, and then we'll wrap up the class. So, I know that diagnosing Jane and coming up with a really pertinent course for her performance problems in 5 minutes is a big challenge. So we don't expect you to get it all right. But what I do recommend is if you're dealing with Jane in real life and you've identified a class that you want to send her to, take a look at the course description and the objectives of the learning objectives of the class and incorporate them right into the employee transfer of learning form if you're going to use something like this. It's really beneficial. So who wants to take a jaunt at what you're going to send Jane to?
Yeah, actually 3 I thought good. So there's a class in New Jersey that they offer. What's that class called?
Respect and dignity.
Respect and dignity. That might be appropriate. I've had a similar type of a situation with an employee who was a reader, and so we found a book for that person to read, and then they had to do like a 1-page summary of it, and that worked really well with her. And then the National Center for State Courts has a free online supervisor training taught by Dr. Dan Strub that is excellent. I've had one of my managers take that in Oregon as well.
Great plug. And great way to tap into what an employee already likes to do. She likes to read, so give her a book and have her read a book on how to improve her performance in this key area.
Why are we assuming that Jane's the problem?
Maybe Jane's not the problem.
I'm looking at it. I trained years ago in Blanchard situational leadership. Okay? And it looks to me like you've got a boss. First of all, she's not giving really good specifics, and it's like we talked earlier, damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. Okay? To me, the employee, when you look at the quadrant matrix there, obviously her morale is down.
Yes.
Okay, which requires certain type of supervisor intervention. Obviously, the supervisor thinks that she hasn't managed the objective elements of the job, many of which are actually style-based more than anything else. To me, if she sees that she can be effective or whatever, or he, I don't know if it's male or female, because it was written in such a catty way, I guess I assumed it was a woman supervisor. It's important for her to go into the coaching mode, all right, and to try to reinforce the positive that happens and to support her more where she sees something wrong, because she hasn't, through this evaluation, effectively communicated what she really wants her to do. It's too general.
Okay.
Okay. And so I would put it on the supervisor to go in there, and once you go through that coaching, if you can't develop her, then you can say, I've done all I can, this is not a good fit.
Right.
But I just don't think that the supervisor's done everything that she should or can do in this instance.
All right. Yes.
Because everybody interprets it differently.
And you know what? Some of this can be fleshed out in the peer performance review or the peer review form, right? If you're getting feedback consistent with what your viewpoints are from this individual's peers, it can be part of the manager-supervisor problem, or it can really be a legitimate problem that Jane needs to address. And Jane is real in our court. I can tell you what we ended up doing, but your feedback, sir.
I was looking at the commentary here. She says, how many times do I have to go over the same thing with you? A monkey could do this work. I mean, that is really crossed the line. That person really needs
some coaching.
Some coaching, and there's, how she interacts with employees. I'm sure this is not the only person, but the way she looks at those people that are working under her, that's definitely, she needs...
You're right on target. This is a sharp group. You've got great insights. And you're right. As complex as managing employee performance is, it's even more complex to manage the manager performance, right? And that's the importance of having this calibration throughout the entire organization, from the court administrator all the way down through the court operations supervisors, and holding everybody consistently across the board. What we did with Jane is we did send her to how to communicate with tact and professionalism, because we were getting feedback from outside the organization on peer review forms that Jane was struggling with communicating with our court stakeholders in a professional manner. But yes, the supervisor manager does have some performance to improve on as well. And so with that, let's wrap it up. Oh, our last slide's not there. Oh, she had it all, and I messed it up. Let me fix it, Kate. You talk.
Sorry about that.
No, that's my bad. There we go.
All right, so results of balanced performance management. Increased productivity and ownership. Setting the bar higher so you're hiring the right people in the right positions. Addressing difficult issues and creating transparency in the process. Improves communication among colleagues, and admitting that they have employees who are having performance problems and needing help from each other on how to fix it. And improving employee accountability. The ones who want to stay, the ones we want managed up or out, or managed up more out.
And so thank you all for coming to our presentation today. And remember that, again, Dr. Farrar has some fabulous tools and information on his website, and his business cards are up here. So thank you. Have a great evening.